The Bank of Canada is destroying you with inflation. So was it worth it? We're going to get into that right now. And the Bank of Canada seems to think it was worth it, and they are being stubborn about all the effects that this has caused. So let's get right into it. Basically, this was a conference that they did November 14th. It was actually a conference on diversity, equity, and inclusion in economics. I'm not even going to say anything about that. So anyway, they said basically, unfortunately, there is no easy out to restoring price stability. So basically what they're saying there is there's going to be a certain degree of pain that people are going to have to feel before inflation comes back down. Now, I think by chance, inflation is likely to come down at least by measured by the CPI next year. But that's still going to mean that they're going to hold rates low into probably Q3, Q4 of next year. We'll see how things play out, but that's just my kind of base case on what's happening. But it's really interesting what they said here, I think, because you guys know everything that happened, the inflation we've seen, and this is what they said. Never before has so much of the economy been shut down. Okay, we acknowledge that that's true. Who shut the economy down? It was the government. Okay, so let's continue. So suddenly and for so long. But thanks to new vaccines and exceptional fiscal and monetary policies, the recovery was the fastest ever. So exceptional fiscal and monetary policies, the recovery was as fastest as ever. So the Bank of Canada still thinks that they saved the economy and everything is great. They're still not acknowledging the absolute mess that they created in 2021 when they pushed everybody from your average Joe to your pension fund way out on the risk curve, buying into all these asset bubbles that we've seen. And now they're getting absolutely destroyed and punished for it this year, and they probably will next year too. I think it's going to get even worse in terms of what people are going to feel who bought into these bubbles in 2021 going into 2023. I think there is a sense of people being in denial, especially in the housing market, about what is going on. You're seeing sales drop across major metro areas across Canada, and I think that will continue into next year. I think the pain really comes when people have to sell because they lose their job, and that is going to come. The Bank of Canada has acknowledged that the unemployment rate has to go up, and they are just being very choosy with their words so that they don't say that we're going to head into a recession, when actually that's what they're saying in not so many words. They're saying growth is going to be practically flat next year, which means it's going to be negative even if it was flat as they say it, because we know their CPI measuring is just totally broken. I'm going to show you that right now. So their CPI measurement is just completely broken, as we know. So I'm going to show you John Williams' Shadow Stats website. Link is in the description. It's a great website for going back and looking at how inflation was measured throughout past history during the 80s and the 1990s in this case. Now, this is US inflation, but it's exactly the same sort of manipulations that you see here in Canada too. And we have very similar economies, very similar inflation. So it's very, very a good thing. It's a good indicator to use, put it that way. So basically, if you take a look at this chart, this is the CPI as measured in 1980. But basically, the blue line is the 1980 base CPI, and the red line is the CPIU, the current CPI model that we see today. And what you can see on there is they essentially follow the same trajectory, the same ups and downs, but it's the extremes, isn't it? On the one hand, the blue line is going up massively, and on the other hand, the red line is practically flat if you look at that. And we're going back like over 40 years in history to the 1980s, and you can see that essentially that red line, it barely goes above 5%, but inflation was around, as measured by the CPIU, around 5%, between 3 and 5% throughout the past 40 years. And then if you look at the blue line, well, it's telling you a completely different story to that, and one that we know all too well. And that is that inflation has been running at 10% for the longest period of time. Now, I know a lot of people won't accept that. They won't want to accept that because that means that they are being destroyed through the inflation that the central bank is doing by these ridiculous monetary policies that we've seen. The political aspect of the central bank being used to essentially inflate asset bubbles as well for political gain. That's also happened. But you really have to think it's not so much what the inflation rate is doing as much as what wages are doing. Because it would be all great if wages were growing at 10% per year. Because then inflation, even though it would shoot above it as it does on the blue line in this chart, you would still basically have people being able to afford those price increases. But essentially, if you go based off the 1980s base CPI, which I'm not saying is entirely accurate either, I'm just saying it's more accurate than the model that we use right now, then that means that people's real adjusted, inflation adjusted wages have just been negative for the longest period of time. I mean, imagine, look at this chart and see where we are right now. So you're saying inflation around 16, 17, 18% this year. Imagine if you got a 2% rise. Imagine if you got zero. If you got zero, nothing, no rise, nada, nothing, zero. Imagine that. You literally lose 17, 18% of your purchasing power in 1 year. What will that do to the economy? That will be seen next year, and it's going to be an absolute carnage of a situation. And we're already seeing the sort of echoes of this happening. You've got Amazon, big layoffs. You've got big tech companies laying people off. And that is not a good sign because these were the white knights of the past recession. These were the companies that rose from the ashes really strong. If you think about when the smartphone came out, if you think about when Facebook was launched, it was around 2008. And these companies kind of rose from the recession and created this really tech-induced bubble that started around then. And really, it had happened prior in 2001 and everything like that with the tech bubble. But it's very interesting, I think, with inflation because, the government, Bank of Canada, is going to lead you to believe that it's running at 6, 7%, whatever it is. But the reality is you have to double it and add some to get to the real number. And we know that. We know that, right? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work that out. I mean, I've seen so many products in the grocery store go upwards of 30% or more increase in price. Gas prices are up massively year over year. So many things have rose in price. And this isn't just a phenomenon that has happened over the past 2 years. It's just because it's become so extreme that everybody is starting to notice and feel it this year. But it's always been there. And I was saying it for a long time. Ever since we moved to Canada, the inflation has been kind of crazy. Me coming from the UK, which I think has seen lower rates of inflation, and looking at especially food prices and how much they've gone up in Canada over the time that I've lived here, has been kind of nuts to me as from an outside person coming into Canada. So a lot of people are just used to these prices going up, but the reality is it can't be sustained when you have wages that are so negative. People's purchasing power is just being dwindled to nothing. So let's take a look at what CBC is saying about all of this stuff. So Canada's inflation rate unchanged in October at 6.9%. Economists had been expecting rate to inch higher, but instead it was unchanged. Canada's inflation rate was 6.9% in October, matching the pace of the seen in the previous month. We all know that's just complete BS. It's not 6.9%. It's over 15% as that chart. I believe that chart more than I do the CBC and the government Statistics Canada. After easing off in September, gasoline prices increased again in October, pushing their annual change up to 17.18% in the past 12 months. That's up from 13.2% annual pace previously. So again, they're showing you like 17.8% rise in gas prices, and we're just led to believe that everything is absolutely fine. Now, I'm definitely noticing some changes right now, and I'm not even going to talk about those so much because I'm definitely noticing some big changes, at least in the economy here in Alberta, but it's too early to say whether they are actually going to mean something. So we'll see in a month or two whether those changes continue to happen, and then I'll definitely be doing videos about them because this will be a major catalyst to the housing market in Alberta and probably across Canada, because if it's happening here, it's likely happening everywhere else too. So you can basically see the chart there. You can see the interest rates rushing to catch up with the inflation rate. They can't even get it up there because it would just destroy people. I mean, already the interest rates are destroying people because Canada is so leveraged. You know, when you have so much debt, it's really, really simple. When you have people in so much debt, even if you put the interest rates up a tiny bit, it has a massive effect. The more debt you have, the more effect it's going to have. So the amount interest rates have gone up is already destroying people. They're resorting to credit cards just to get by and maintain their current lifestyle. So right now is like that calm before the storm. And essentially next year is going to be that transition into where businesses are forced to lay people off, and then the defaults start to come. So everything's really quiet right now. And I think the banking crisis is really likely to happen next year, towards the end of next year, because it's going to be when loads of people are defaulting. Now, the fact is, unfortunately, in Canada, we don't have very good statistics that show us what the default rates are. They're they lag so far behind, and we rely on these quarterly reports from Equifax to tell us what's really going on. And it's just insane. In the US, they have so many different models and indicators and data reporting tools that they can look at. And here we just have barely anything. And I think it's like that for a reason. I was looking for this video just to find a chart of real wages adjusted for inflation. Couldn't find one. Can you believe that? Can you honestly believe that? Well, I'll tell you why that is. It's because they don't want people to know. And you can find these charts for the US very easily. But Canada is a weird country in the sense that all this stuff just sort of gets hidden and accepted, and the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it. It's like a taboo subject. Drives me absolutely insane. But before my blood boils on that, let's get back to this. So the price of a fill-up continues to add fuels to Canada's inflationary fire, but another major source of consumer consternation is the cost of food. It is showing signs that it may be finally heading in the opposite direction. Food prices increased by 10.1% in the year up to October. Yeah, that sounds like it's coming down really fast. That's still ahead of the overall rate, which has been the case for 11 months in a row. But it's a slight decrease from 10.3% in September. Okay, guys, it's okay. Everything's fine because inflation on food has dropped 0.2%. It's all good. Just absolutely mad. I laugh at this stuff because it is just so ridiculous. I mean, it is unbelievable that people write this stuff in the mainstream media and people lap this up thinking, oh, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good knowing that food prices are coming down again, even though they're not. And that's just the reality. The media just goes on basically what they want people to feel instead of what they need to see, what's relevant. They don't tell you any of that, unfortunately, anymore. And way in the past, they used to be more accurate, and they've just got more and more watered down as we've gone on. And then it talks about this business owner. And it says his input costs have gone up for things like flour, sugar, and butter. And what's really interesting is he talks about here how his input costs have gone up and how he's had to raise the prices. But what's really interesting is he says that he's foregone paying himself a salary And he says he's done that because he knows there's only so much customers can pay in terms of price hikes. And this is where you really get to in the real economy. You know, people like the restaurants are probably okay now because it's all going on credit cards, right? But when the recession really hits and people start to feel it, they will start cutting back. And my guess is that's already happening. We don't go and eat out at restaurants. We live a really frugal lifestyle, way below our means. And the thing is, it's really, I wonder what's going on. Comment if you've been to a restaurant. Are they really busy? And let us know what location you're in. Because I see people are probably going to be cutting back. And then again, what do the restaurants do? You know, they can't exactly hike prices if the demand is going down. So they're essentially screwed. They're back in that position where they have to cut costs like during the pandemic, and they will cut people who work there. They will lay people off, and it won't just be restaurants. I'm just explaining that in a real simple way. It will be every business that produces anything is gonna be faced with the same situation. Even the Walmarts of the world, the Amazon of the world, they're seeing the same thing. They're warning us that big problems are ahead, and people just refuse to listen to what they're saying. They just think, it'll be okay. Canada is different. Canada is different. Canada is better. I think that's what people like to believe, when actually the reality is Canada is worse. It's way worse than the US. It's just been in this artificial environment for so long that people have the recency bias. They don't understand what's going on. So they think everything is rosy and okay when it's far from that. So anyway, if you enjoy this video, you might like that one there. You might like that one there. Please sign up to my email list. Link is in the description, also in the pinned comment. And I will see you guys on the next